shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I'ma get a scholarship to King's College. I probably shouldn't brag, but dag, I'm amazed and astonished. The problem is I got a lot of brains but no polish. I gotta holler just to be heard with every word I drop knowledge. I'm a diamond in the rough, a shining piece of coal, trying to reach my goal. My power of speech unimpeachable. Only 19, but my mind is older. These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage I've learned to manage. I don't have a gun to brandish. I walk these streets famished. The plan is to fan this spark into a flame. But damn, it's getting dark, so let me spell out the name. I am the A-L-E-X-A-N-D-E-R. We are meant to be a colony that runs independently. Meanwhile, Britain keeps shitting on us endlessly. Essentially, they tax us relentlessly. Then King George turns around, runs a spending spree. He ain't never gonna set his descendants free. So there will be a revolution in this century. Enter me.
He says in parentheses.
Don't be shocked when your history book mentions me. I will lay down my life if it sets us free. Eventually, you'll see my ascendancy. And I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. And yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. And yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. It's time to take a shot.
Good evening and welcome everyone to this evening's National Infrastructure Bank Coalition webinar. I do want to say that Hamilton is a great show, and I think we can thank Hamilton for making history sexy again. And, you know, Hamilton created one of the first national banks here in the US, and we're going to be doing shout outs to him over the course of this evening's program because we would like to see a national bank brought forth again to address some of the important issues that we have facing us as a country today. My name's Julie Olson. I'll be your moderator this evening, and we have a great lineup of speakers that we're going to get to in a moment. But first of all, I would like to share with you a brief essay that was published in Wired magazine. We're heading up towards Labor Day weekend and the end of the summer, and we have a lot to contemplate, I think, because of the events that we have seen here and around the globe. So Wired magazine says, June was the hottest June on record. Then July went one step further and became the hottest month, period. Around the world, heat domes form basically giant caps of extra warm air that self-perpetuate for weeks. Such extreme heat is imperiling your favorite foods and your health, and even the health of unborn babies. And because of El Nino, the band of warm water in the Pacific has formed and will linger through the winter. Next year could bring even more record temperatures. The heat in the oceans has been off the charts, way above previous year's temperatures. Waters hit 101 degrees Fahrenheit off the coast of Florida, leading to mass die-offs of corals. Scientists are also worried about how such heat might be shaking the very foundation of the ocean food web. Sky-high temperatures and brutal droughts, which climate change makes more common and longer lasting, have set vast tracts of Canada on fire, pouring smoke into the US. And of course, we all know about the events of October 8th in Lahaina, Maui. Weirdly enough, climate change is also making it dangerously wetter in some places. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture than a cooler one. Last week, Tropical Storm Hillary unleashed unfathomable amounts of water on Mexico and the western US, leading to widespread flooding and debris flows of mud, boulders, and trees. Summer may technically almost be over, but the danger isn't. And that's one of the reasons we're here tonight, to talk about how a national infrastructure bank would be able to address pressing infrastructure needs in our country that will help us deal with these kinds of climate-induced catastrophes in the future. So with that, I'd like to go to our first speaker, Alfecca Mutardi, a former senior economist with the International Monetary Fund and now the chief economist for the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for joining us. We're so excited to be here with you again to update you on where we are with our National Infrastructure Bank proposal. How would this work? How would this Hamiltonian bank work? that will solve so many of our nation's problems. One of the little skits from the musical that you just listened to was a repartee between George Washington and the cabinet, these rapid fire debates that they were having going on in the musical, where George Washington said, "The issue on the table, ladies and gentlemen, or just gentlemen, is Secretary Hamilton's plan to assume state debt and establish a national infrastructure bank. Secretary Jefferson, you have the floor to debate this." Well, they went on to debate it. They created the first national bank of the United States. It was capitalized using states' debts from the Revolutionary War that were taken up to the federal level. It was backstopped by the constitutional remit that all government activities should promote the general welfare. And this directed bank credit into manufacturers. For the first time, we were an agrarian country, and we wanted to escape from underneath the thumb of the British. One way to do that was to build our manufacturing center. And of course, to do that, you need infrastructure like roads and bridges and things like that to develop the nation and the workforce. Later, this was called the American system. This Hamiltonian policy of swapping or using debt to capitalize a bank was used successfully 3 times later in our nation's history as a workaround to the federal budget. It solved banking crises and built up the physical capital of the country and improved the workforce. So where are we today? Today, the economy is in turmoil. It's still developing this turmoil, as I'll explain to you in just a minute. The infrastructure is definitely crumbling. We could have avoided altogether the catastrophe that took place in Hawaii when an aging electric grid actually caught the place on fire and burned it down. That just was lives lost, property lost that didn't need to be. If there was an infrastructure bank there that could have helped those districts to rebuild their electric grid, why shouldn't we do it? And America is falling behind competitively. We're losing our competitive edge. We've lost all of our manufacturing base, and we need to get it back. We have high debt and a possible recession coming. That's why we need a 5th national infrastructure bank. So where are we on the economy? What we know now, as of today, the latest news articles is that the economy is continuing to surprisingly grow. But it's growing it grew in the second quarter at 2.1%. That's kind of surprised everybody who had been predicting a recession for a year. But you can see from this picture that the growth rates are slowly coming down. And there are leading indicators that show how the economy is slowing. Manufacturing output is declined for the 9th straight month. That's a leading indicator of where we are on the economy. And there's also a leading economic indicators index that has been negative for months through July and is predicting a recession. Contrast that with the labor market, which remains tight. Employers have added an average of 300,000 jobs a month over the last year. That got us out of COVID. But however, new hiring, voluntary quits, new pay for new jobs, all of that is slowing down. The only sector that's showing wages rising faster than inflation is for one sector of really tight labor market. That is the skilled trade workers. Those are the only ones whose wages are rising high, and we have a shortage, a big shortage there. Electricians, plumbers, welders, those kind of folks, big shortage. The CPI is looking a little bit better. The inflation, it's cooled down to about 3% per year compared to 9% last year. However, when you strip out food and energy prices, with something called the core inflation is still 2.5 times higher than the Federal Reserve's target for inflation. And because it's 2.5 times higher, they will keep on pushing. Raising fixed rate mortgage is running around 3.23%. That's killing the housing market. Demand is way down because buyers find houses too expensive for them to pay the mortgages. And supply is also way down because homeowners don't want to put their houses up for sale because they want to hold on to those existing low mortgages. The Fed has resumed raising interest rates. Now they're up to around, the short-term interest rates are up to around 5.5% per year. That slows the economy, and further rate increases are expected. And then that has already turned the banking sector upside down, this fast rate of the interest rates. So banks are very vulnerable. Deposits are fleeing out of banks, seeking higher yields elsewhere. The Treasury Department is trying to fill up. It's after the debt ceiling was negotiated. They're trying to fill up their bank account again. That's going to suck another $1 trillion out of the banking system. And then commercial real estate is deteriorating fast. Both office real estate and multifamily apartment houses have lost 25% of their value over the last year. They all borrowed a lot to buy that real estate. $1 trillion is coming due, and a lot of folks might not be able to pay their loans because of the higher interest rates. And because of all those things, the rating agencies, Moody's, Fitch, S&P Global, have downgraded the banks, and both medium and large banks. And the stock market is flashing red for a big correction that's not been seen since about the year 2000. So on account of all that, Wall Street economists and the conference board that tracks the economy now predict that the recession will very likely come in the first quarter of 2024. They base that on the elevated inflation, high interest rates, dissipating pandemic savings, and lower government spending, and also the cutbacks in bank lending as a result of their being under stress. So with these budget cuts, the NIB will be the only policy to dig us out of a coming recession. So for this, we have a bill in Congress. As many of you know, it is H.R. 4052, the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2023, which will create a $5 trillion public bank to direct credit towards investment in infrastructure. Currently, the bill was just reintroduced in June. It already has 13 co-sponsors from all over the United States: California, Illinois, Michigan, New Mexico, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We thank all of our grassroots efforts, folks who have been out there on the ground drumming up support for this bank, and we expect that the support may grow even more from here. So we've made the proposition up at the front here that this Hamiltonian bank will fix a lot of things that are wrong with our economy right now. So how exactly does that work? How does the bill do that? The first thing is to solve the budget constraint. We have spent less and less and less over the last 60 years on infrastructure because it's got squeezed out of the budget. Many congressmen don't want to raise taxes, or they want to lower taxes. They want to pay for other things that they have to pay for, like Medicare and Social Security and the defense budget, and the infrastructure investment is the first thing to go. You can see that happened with the negotiations over the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that passed a year and a half ago. That's only 10% of them. Here's the new money that bill provides. That's only 10% of everything we need. We need $5,000 billion or $5 trillion to cover all of the gap, the financing gap that's been identified by the American Society of Civil Engineers, and also to meet other infrastructure categories that we think are critical: high-speed rail, affordable housing, protecting our food supplies by getting more water into agricultural areas. We need all those things. And this bank is big enough to cover it all, and it directs the credit, and it won't be interfered with by big debates over the budget. Once the bank gets started, it just will roll along and provide this financing. It also solves problems of high interest rates and high inflation. How does that work? Because it provides loans at low-cost Treasury bond rates. Right now, the Treasury bond rate is 3 percentage points lower than a 30-year mortgage. So you can see the big discrepancy there. It also creates demand for American-made goods. That's a requirement of the bill. And when you're building more things at home, then you're stimulating even more activity behind the scenes, which grows the economy. It directly addresses production bottlenecks. If any of them come up, like we haven't got enough steel or we haven't got enough, roads coming out of the ports to deliver things, anything like that, the bank can lend for those kinds of things. And it protects our nation's food supply. We don't want to have another crisis in the food area where we see high inflation coming because we've just lost our water supplies to grow things. And it'll offset any coming recession. We know that the Fed policy wants to put people out of work. That's how they want to control inflation. That's kind of a nonsense policy. The NIB will hire up all those people, train them, put them into great paying jobs, into family sustaining wage jobs to help the economy dig its way out of a recession. And it directs investment into a productive sector, which grows the economy twice as fast as it has been growing historically. Compare that to a new study that just came out and was presented at the annual convention of economists in Wyoming called Jackson Hole. That paper found that Fed rate increases, quick Fed rate interest rate increases like we've had actually slow the economy in the long run. So we're working in the opposite, that policy is working in the opposite direction, pulling our growth rates down. And we may have a banking crisis. If we have a banking crisis, it's going to make the recession worse. The NIB will help to rationalize that, especially because a large part of the banking crisis in 2008 and again today is caused by overexuberance in the real estate market. And we want to help rationalize that real estate market by building affordable housing and getting people into secure housing. And we want to address the worker shortage. A few folks have asked us about this, addressing the worker shortage and how do we do the training. So we looked again at our proposal for the NIB. What will it do? First of all, it will be hiring up into a lot of new construction jobs to build our American infrastructure. So where will these workers come from? If we have very low unemployment rate right now, where will they come from? So one place that they'll come from is these low-paying service jobs. Another place is workforce dropouts on account of the COVID. There's a lot of people that are not back in the workforce, underreported, partially employed gig workers, those kind of things, ex-offenders, ex-military, immigration. All of these workers can be attracted into these great paying jobs just simply by offering them higher pay, and they will come. So in the practical world, there are several ways that we can train these workers up. The biggest and the best bet for doing this is the union apprenticeship program. They have all the unions have registered apprenticeships, and some of our speakers will talk about that. They train workers for these great paying jobs. They allow them to work in the daytime as apprentices and then take courses at night. So they're earning while they're learning. They have specific programs like helmets to hard hats and trades orientation to get people, educated about the benefits of being in the trades. But what they tell us is that these programs are, while they're it's able to ramp them up and make them larger, what they're really looking for, the unions, is a steady, high source of union jobs that will be able to be backstop the education programs. And so the National Infrastructural Bank will provide that because it'll ramp up all of and make a steady stream of investment and projects that these unions can train up workers for. And then federal
Okay, Alfecca, I'm sorry, excuse me for a moment. I'm sorry to do this to you, but we have another speaker who needed to be on at precisely 20 after the hour. So I think all our viewers here can see what a wealth of information you have, and we would love to review some of this stuff and open it up for Q&A at the end of the session. But right now we need to go to Representative Darisha Parker, who is here from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Representative Parker, the floor is yours.
Hey, good evening, everybody. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. I would like to say thank you for the previous speakers. She gets me really fired up and pumped up. So many people may not know I am from Philadelphia. The area that I have, and you're talking to a woman who is in her blood and in her veins, is the descendant of a union person. He was my grandfather, and he worked many, many years, rest in peace, on the railroads. So when she starts talking about the infrastructure and she starts talking about the jobs and talks about that a lot of people may not be able to see and taste and smell right now, is literally music to my ears. And the reason why is it's annoying right now. We see things as we're talking about this infrastructure break, but a lot of people don't know how fast or if it's ever going to be, because people have been hearing about it and sometimes people are frustrated. But one of the things that gives me hope is I have to look at something that talks about in the trillions, and it also talks about the 25 million of jobs. That's the green light that gives individuals like me hope. That's the green light that gives individuals like me other opportunities. And that's the green light that's going to give my constituents, not just in Philadelphia County, but in Harrisburg County, Lebanon, and every part of the Commonwealth, opportunity into a trade that's going to change the income in their family and families and generations to come. I was intrigued. I'm very excited and proud that both of my congressional members, Congressmember Boyle and Congressman Evans, have both signed on their support of this infrastructure bank. That just lets you know from the federal level that individuals see what can actually be. When people keep saying that the recession is coming, if you talk to many of my constituents, we will tell you that the recession is now. And many of us are actually preparing, and we're actually getting ready, because you notice, if you think about 2023 versus 2019, think about how much your gas was. Think about your groceries. Think about all of these things now, because we're paying them at a higher rate. So that means that we're paying things at a higher rate, that individuals need to be making more income in their houses, and things need to change. So because of the supply and the demand. So I'm not going to belabor an issue to let you know that I am 100% on board. I'm always going to be supportive of anything, because why? It's pro-union. Yay, union. So you're going to always have somebody who's 100% on board, enthusiastic, and to give African-American kids something different to think about and look. And we need to start, when we're talking about our kids, sometimes I wish it was a way that we could start talking to them about these type of opportunities pre-K. I think we need to adopt other models. I think sometimes when you start talking to children about careers in 8th grade on up, I think it's a little bit too late. I think we got to start exposing them what can be at the lower level grade, so that they already have certain things that we expose them as we're building in things and bringing these type of references and type of information to them, all walks of life. So I just want to say thanks to all of you. Stu, you always, and you and your crew always know you have my office's support on speed dial. I'm always here for you. And let's go get them, and let's make sure that this is the type of bill in a few more weeks. The PA House will be back in the majority. So this is the type of bill that I want to hopefully that the Congress and the Senate do what they need to do, that we as legislators do our part, so we can make a better life for the individuals of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So I thank you for this time, for sharing my passion, my enthusiasm to why I'm involved, why I can see it happening, and why this is not a microwave. This is your favorite meal, that today is Wednesday, that you had to go to 7 stores to buy all of the ingredients because you're about to have some family in from out of town, and you have to plan out what that menu is going to look like. That's what I think of the infrastructure. It's not the microwave popcorn. I think of it as a long range type of a plan and a meal that's going to take a lot of ingredients to make happen. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it over back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Parker. Really appreciate your insights from Philadelphia. And certainly we really believe that an infrastructure bank and those investments in infrastructure have the ability to unleash the ingenuity and productivity of American workers, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country. And I also like to point out that a lot of these construction jobs are high-tech jobs. It's not just a plumber or not just somebody who's going to come work on your furnace. So they require engineering, and a high degree of knowledge and sophistication. And we do need to start training our young folks early and showing them how challenging and rewarding these types of careers can be. And with that, I'd like to go to our next speaker. So we're going to go to the other side of the country to Senator Bob Hasegawa from Tukwila, Washington. Senator Hasegawa.
Hi, Julie. Thank you.
Hi there. You're welcome.
Nice to see you, and Ofeka as well. And I'm really pleased to see my former partner in crimes, former Senator Marilyn Chase, on this call. She's been so supportive of my public banking efforts over the years, and we're making progress, slow but steady, I'm glad to report. And Ruth Fruin, please touch bases with me if you get a chance. Okay, so anyway, I'm glad to see that the laundry list of benefits that the NIB will have for all of us has grown by even more now that you've added the fact that we can defeat the banking crisis and high interest rates and budget cuts. I mean, there's just no downside to this. I don't understand. Well, I do understand what the problem is, but I think we all kind of know how those who are in power feel threatened by this and their hoarded gold, I guess. But here in Washington State, last year we passed a joint memorial to Congress asking them to pass and for the president to sign the National Infrastructure Bank bill. And I noticed that chat has been disabled here. So I'll just, if you want to see that piece of legislation, you can just go to leg.wa.gov, leg.wa.gov. And on the left side, you'll see a link for bill information. Just type in 8001. And that'll give you everything you need to know about that joint memorial. But, I really appreciate Representative Parker's testimony. I know that, it has social justice embedded within the bill, which is very important to me. I come out of the labor movement. I'm a 34-year Teamster. And after that, I joined the Operating Engineers Union. So I'm both a general Teamster member, but also a building trades member. And there's this organization called the Council of State Governments, which is divided into Eastern, Northern, Southern, and West. So at any rate, I know that CSG East passed a resolution supporting this, and now that encompasses all the states from the Eastern Coast support the National Infrastructure Bank. Last year, we tried to pass it at CSG West, and it deadlocked. We were one vote shy of getting it adopted. So we're going to try again this year. CSG West was canceled because of a labor dispute at our facility that we were scheduled to meet at. And so I have to give props to CSG West for honoring that picket line, not crossing it and postponing their event. As much as that was difficult for them to make that decision, they took the right principled stand. I'm really proud of them for doing that. I know that we tried to pass a resolution supporting it at NCSL. And surprisingly, from out of nowhere came some labor opposition from one national union. And, this has happened in the past. National unions sometimes get a little sidetracked, and it's up to us to get them back on track in support of their membership. It happened to me several years ago at NCSL when we were trying to pass a resolution to support net neutrality and spectrum allocation and fairness for communities. And the Communications Workers Union opposed that. And I was just so shocked that they actually opposed net neutrality of all things. So, but I think that they've come around, and I think that the union at question here at NCSL will come around too, but we just have to educate them, work harder on talking to their local affiliates and whatnot. So I know that when we're talking about social justice, the National Black Caucus of State Legislators has adopted a resolution to support this. The National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators has adopted a resolution to support it. The National Asian Pacific American Caucus of State Legislators, which I belong to, has adopted a resolution to support the National Infrastructure Bank. I think everybody recognizes the benefits and the struggle for social justice and how this is going to help us bring equity, economic equity to our country, which it desperately needs right now. We're seeing the country become so bifurcated along monetary lines. You know, the income inequality gap has just reached historic levels that it hasn't seen since the days of the Great Depression. And as a public of the United States, we as all living here, we're all in similar circumstances. All of our struggles are connected. Economic justice is indelibly linked to racial justice and equality, and just the broader vision that we all have for a country that we're always trying to make better for the people. So I am really proud that our state passed this joint memorial, and still struggling to get our congressional representatives to sign on to it. I can't understand why they wouldn't, but like I said, the struggle continues, and I'm very optimistic that, you know, with all of you on this call, and each of you are going to organize 20 people, and each of those 20 people are going to organize 20 more people, and pretty soon, before you know it, we'll all have good family wage jobs to go home to. So thank you for your hard work and trying to promote and adopt this critical, just game-changing bill. I mean, $5 trillion of lending capacity, 25 million jobs, with a social justice component to all of it. And just want to say thank you for all your good work. I appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much, Senator Hasegawa, and we really appreciate you leading the charge there in Washington State and successfully getting that memoriam through the legislature there. Now, I do want to say, and to let everybody on the call know, that we actually sent a lobbying team to NCSL, and we had put out a request for donations to help us fund that trip. And luckily, our supporters were very generous and donated, so we were able to send those folks out there to Indiana. And we actually were able to put forth the case. We had one of our folks was able to grab the mic in one of the seminars and launched into an impassioned speech about why we needed a national infrastructure bank. So we felt like it was a very worthwhile trip. And I do want to say that I think it's far better for your proposed legislation to raise some arguments and discussion than for people to just be ho-hum about it. Because if they're ho-hum, it means that they don't even care. But here, at least we know because that because of the labor concerns that came up, we know that there is an objection. And we are currently working with that organization to address that objection and to move forward. And I just want to make sure everybody here on the call knows is that we have been open to other groups over the course of this legislation to make sure that the concerns of other organizations and other groups have been listened to and that their input has been adopted. And so we are actually very happy with the output of the NCSL. But now I'd like to go to our next speaker of our champions, this time from New Mexico, where he's been instrumental in bringing attention to the National Infrastructure Bank, Senator Bill Tallman from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Very glad to have the opportunity to join us. I have two quick items this evening. One is that yesterday we learned that we have a second Congresswoman from New Mexico who has signed on as a sponsor of the NIB bill, that Congresswoman Teresa Fernandez. So we have two of our three congresspersons who've now signed on as co-sponsors of the NIB bill. So the other item involves a recent meeting of the national meeting of the NCSL, National Council of State Legislatures, where I had the honor and privilege of sponsoring a resolution urging Congress to enact HR 4020. So the NCSL every year has a national meeting, in addition to a lot of regional meetings. And this year it was in Indianapolis, and they have 5 or 6, 7 various committees dealing with such items as economic development and finance. And our resolution was on the Infrastructure and Natural Resources Committee, which met 2 weeks ago yesterday. And at that meeting, they had about roughly 10 to 12 resolutions. And of course, my resolution was one of them. And my resolution generated more discussion than any other resolution. Some of the resolutions passed with no discussion. There was a couple of resolutions that had 1 or 2 people that spoke in defense or opposition. So my particular resolution had 3 or 4 folks stood up and spoke for it. 3 or 4 folks stood up and spoke against it. And it was defeated on a vote of 8 to 20, but it generated a lot of discussion. There was only 28 out of the 50 states were represented at this meeting, and they only need 25 plus 1 in order to conduct business. But if you were to analyze the state's population, you could make a good argument that it really wasn't a very representative of the United States, because each state, regardless of the population, received just 1 vote. So anyway, that's as I said, it did go down to defeat, but I don't think that's anything to be concerned about, since we have had so many. There's about 25 states where a similar resolution has passed both chambers, and 7 states that were has been where they have enacted resolutions or memorials in one of the chambers. So it's gotten a lot of support around the country, including a lot of large counties and cities, as well as a lot of national organizations such as the National Association of Counties. So those are 2 quick items. We have 2 congresswomen from our state that have signed on, and our resolution regarding the NIB generated a lot of discussion at the Indianapolis NCSL Summit. That's all I have to report. Thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Senator Tallman. Always good to hear from you. For our next speaker, we're going to go to Brooklyn, New York. We have Assemblywoman Joanne Simon with us this evening. Joanne?
Hi, how are you? I'm here in Brooklyn. I wanted to have backdrop, which is the Brooklyn Bridge. I wanted to get a picture of the water main break the other day and how it was raining in the subway system in Times Square. But I wasn't able to get that on as a backdrop. But it did raise the issue of infrastructure. And so I want to thank Senator Tallman, who was there and admirably acquitted himself at the committee meeting with regard to the National Infrastructure Bank. And I was glad that it did get a lot of conversation. You know, in New York State, in the State Assembly, which is where I sit, 65 members of the Assembly, which is more than a third, we have 150, signed a letter within a very short period of time. I would say it was a couple of days that circulated, signed on to a letter in support of the National Infrastructure Bank. Because one of the big issues we have throughout our state is infrastructure in a variety of ways, whether it's our highways, whether it's our water and sewer. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives us an overall GPA of C, which is not admirable. It's mediocre and requires attention, but we get Ds when it comes to our wastewater and our transit and our roads. So those are really major areas. But the other issue that I wanted to address is that the issue is of housing. And in New York, affordability is a huge, huge issue, particularly affordability of housing. And while you might think it was something centered in New York City, and certainly my district right now, it used to be not very wealthy, but now it is that this is a problem throughout the state. There is crumbling infrastructure. We have a public housing, which for which we need $40 billion to repair the outstanding infrastructure problems that we have with NYCHA, which is our New York City Housing Authority. And just NYCHA alone is $40 billion. So this is a huge issue. It will make New York more affordable. It will make it safer. We had the water main break the other day was a 137-year-old water main. It's an old city. But that issue about water mains throughout the state, we have many older cities in New York State because the East Coast, of course, was developed earlier than the West Coast. These are big systemic issues. They are very big ticket items. There is no way that under any regular budgetary process that we would ever be able to get the kind of access to capital that we would get through a national infrastructure bank. And I think that's reflected very much in the fact that within a very short period of time, a couple of days, 65 members of the legislature signed on to the letter supporting the National Infrastructure Bank. I'm pleased that one of our representatives, Adriano Espaillat, has now agreed to sponsor this bill in Congress, but we are also meeting with other representatives as well, hoping to get them on board and hope to have more progress to report the next time that we all meet. So I want to thank everybody with the National Infrastructure Bank. I want to thank the moderator, all of the legislators that have appeared, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work on this issue and make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. Really appreciate having you here. And I do want to say that in the last Congress, we actually had 20 co-sponsors for the legislation, and we have no doubt that we are going to be continuing to add names to the list. And of course, this is where we can use your help, talking to our viewers here in terms of contacting your local congressperson and urging them to add their name as a signer. Next, let's go to Indiana, and we have with us tonight Representative Pat Boy from Michigan City, Indiana. Pat?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm not really talking about what this thing can do. I'm talking about what it's done before. I'm talking about Michigan City's long history of WPA projects that we have here. I don't know if Alpheka can show my PowerPoint or if she even needs to, but the background of the Franklin C. Bridge over Trail Creek before it joins Lake Michigan is one of the structures. It's in the pictures. It could never have been accomplished if it was just left to the city to manage. Most of these are still standing, and many are still in use today. The LaPorte County section of US Highway 20, the longest road in America, was constructed by the WPA for $46,576. It was and still is a major truck route, particularly when the interstates are backed up. Another WPA benefit from 1936 to 1940 was the indexing of many of the birth, marriages, and death records. This was done for 68 out of Indiana's 92 counties, including LaPorte County. In LaPorte County, the WPA projects mainly focused on Washington Park in Michigan City. Through the WPA, along with the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, Michigan City alone employed 2,000 people, mostly local workers, utilizing $660,000 in aid between 1929 and 1939. Now that number would be significantly more today, but that's what it was back then. The Engineers Castle in the zoo, also known as the Rotary Children's Castle, looks like a castle. It was constructed in the Michigan City Zoo from 1935 to 1936, and it's now the Reptile House. The 390 Engineer Regiment, the 84th Division, a World War I unit, placed a plaque on the building. It reads, "In grateful appreciation to the people of Michigan City for having erected this engineer castle. For over 100 years, the official insignia of the Corps of Engineers, United States Army." And that's on the building. The Tower Observatory, which is really an interesting place. It's up on top of a sand dune. It was built in 1936. The WPA workers took a framework discarded by the South Shore Railroad and faced it with limestone. In 1934, 5,000 school children had planted 10,000 pine trees on the dune it sits on, restoring the land to its original vegetation. The tower's roof ornament was the compression chamber from Michigan City's first fire engine. The tower served as an observation point for the US Navy during World War II. The tower was repaired in the 1970s. In 1994, it was closed. Funds were raised and it was reopened following a total restoration project in 2006. It's a lot taller than it looks in the photo, which you can't see. 4 stories, and the stairs are a killer, but the view is worth the climb. While the federal programs paid for the labor, cities like Michigan City had to supply their own materials. The WPA money spent in Washington Park went mostly toward the observation tower and the zoo. New cages and housing went into the zoo, including Monkey Island and the castle, as well as stone benches, walls, and walkways. Those walls and walkways delineate the beach area, separating the beach from the parking lot and still protecting us from the power of Lake Michigan. Other park structures that were completed by the WPA included rock structures that still stand today, a rock garden, parking lots, and even a greenhouse. 400 concrete picnic tables and 700 benches were placed in the park. A water wheel and other structures were created during this period, including a sewage plant and a naval armory. The Franklin Street Bridge is the only historic movable bridge in Indiana and is significant on a state level basis as a result. While the bridge is in northwestern Indiana, and thus near Chicago's massive collection of bascule bridges, the Franklin Street Bridge in Indiana remains noteworthy as a historic bascule bridge that is a plate girder rather than a truss. The bridge is historically complete with railings, bridge tender building, plaques, and riveted girders. While there is even an older historic swing bridge, the only one of its kind in Indiana that pivots for the Amtrak train, it's much older and not a WPA project. The closely located white stucco armory building was also a WPA project, which I wish you could see because it's so gorgeous. It features many Art Deco details, geometric styling, triple entries with large glass windows, and the stark white and blue accents color scheme. It remains a striking building today. The US government allocated $25,501 to build the armory as a training center for the US Naval Reserve, and they completed it after 3 years of work in 1939. It was part of the 9th Naval District until 1965, when the Navy deactivated its Naval Reserve in Michigan City. Ships that were assigned to the armory included the USS Hawk, USS Sacramento, and HSS Hav. Members of the 9th Naval Reserves departed from Michigan City aboard the USS Sacramento in August of 1941, bound for the Hawaiian Islands, making them among those stationed at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. The Navy deactivated the armory in 1965, leasing it to the city until 1977. The Armory has thus seen other uses, like serving as a home to the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Office and as a basketball practice venue for area schools. An Army National Guard unit currently occupies the building. We learned the value of these constructions. We used them and we protected them. They are now historic, but we could never have done this alone without the WPA and the New Deal Bank. And I think that's an important thing to really remember about this. I wish I could have shown the pictures, but can't have everything. Unfortunately, at the NCSL, Indiana did not vote for the resolution. And they said it was because of the concerns of AFSCME, which is the state municipal and county employers. And I don't understand what their concern was. I would have voted for this, but I wasn't a voting member. Thank you so much for doing this tonight. And I keep trying to talk to people about this, but not too many people are listening in Indiana. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much, Pat. That was really a wonderful recap and a great reminder of some of the great quality projects that were built by the WPA. And I do want to say that I believe this year is the 90th anniversary of when FDR kicked off the WPA program. And those projects were built, I do believe, in pretty much every state of the union, maybe not Alaska and Hawaii, but those projects, many of them still exist today. And we can do the same thing with the National Infrastructure Bank and bring back those kinds of quality investments in our public goods and our public spaces. Okay, I do believe Assemblyman Viejas from Chicago is now on the line, or I'm sorry, Alderman Viejas from Chicago. And we'll turn the floor over to Gilbert.
How you doing, Julie? And good evening, everyone. So we passed the resolution here in Chicago supporting this initiative. And as the state of Illinois, we've taken it upon ourselves to pass our own capital bills at the city as well as at the state, rather, as well as the local level. And we're fortunate that we have some, as a transportation hub, that we've also had some infrastructure investments from both the private side as well as the public side, whether it's through O'Hare Airport or through some of the CREATE projects, which is the railroads, along with the Department of Transportation as well as the City of Chicago, where we're trying to eliminate at-cross gradings so that way we can continue to move train traffic through the country. As you know, Chicago is the hub, home to six of the class 1 railroads, and a lot of supplies comes through Chicago. Unfortunately, there's a bottleneck, and so we've been spending upwards of $2 billion thus far to try to align the railroad so that we can continue to get goods from the East Coast to the West Coast and vice versa. And then obviously with the airport, we have a $10 billion infrastructure plan going on right now to modernize the airport, along with $45 billion in infrastructure investments for roads, bridges, and waterways. The city at the local level, City of Chicago, we've implemented and passed a $3.9 billion capital program for the next 4 years, and making sure that we have the necessary funds for matches from the federal level. Also, as it relates to public transportation, we just are embarking on what's called the Red Line Extension, which is a 7-mile extension of our Chicago Transit Authority, which would connect communities on the far south side of the city and allow residents from throughout the city to travel from the far south side to the central business district. And so there's billions of dollars that we have here, but unfortunately, that's not enough money. And as most of the leaders on this call can attest to, is that government does a pretty good job at building things. They just do a horrible thing at deferred maintenance. And we find ourselves in a situation where there are billions of dollars of deferred maintenance requirements and issues that we have throughout the country. And this type of infrastructure bill would do a lot of things. First, it would obviously make sure that public transportation is accessible and we're bold and we're doing high-speed rail, affordable housing. I mean, there's so much opportunity with this bill. And so we need to make sure that as local leaders from throughout the country, that we're continuing to press our congressional delegation to support these types of initiatives because they are economic development stimulators, but more importantly, they create generational wealth for the youth and making sure that we're putting people back to work. And one of the things that I want to continue this, why I want to support this initiative is because of the fact that there is an opportunity to make sure that we're putting in place Buy America clauses, which in turn would create local manufacturing. I think federal government has taken some bold steps as it relates to the CHIPS Act, bringing manufacturing back to the United States. We saw what our reliance was during the pandemic, and I think that was alarming, and we need to make sure that we're bringing local manufacturing back to the United States of America. So listen, I'm just got on this initiative. Excited about infrastructure. My background is in infrastructure. I was a deputy director with the state DOT here in Illinois. I ran a not-for-profit trade association that dealt with infrastructure, both at our state capital and the federal level, advocating for infrastructure. And then also ran a department that was called the Capital Development Board, which is a vertical construction agency, construction management for the arm for the state of Illinois. And now as a local elected official, as an alderman in the city of Chicago, which is for other folks throughout the country, we're council members. So I'm the only council member on the city council that has expertise and background within infrastructure professionally. And so anytime we're talking about infrastructure and making sure that we're investing in infrastructure, you've got my attention. And we're talking about $5 trillion worth of investments that, we're all excited to get 1.2 trillion, but the real ask was 5 trillion. We should have tried to get 5 trillion because there's been a lack of investment from DOT, the US DOT. And I think that with this bill that the congressman from Illinois has introduced, Congressman Danny Davis, I think that this serves for a good vehicle to do a lot of things. So I'm excited to be a part of this coalition, and you can count on me to talk to my colleagues in the Illinois delegation here and make sure that we're educating them about the importance of these types of investments, making sure that we're letting them know that there are cities throughout the country that are reliant on these types of investments.
Thank you so much, Alderman. Really appreciate that. And hopefully you'll be sticking around for the Q&A because I feel like there might be some questions for you.
Excellent.
I'd also like to remind everybody that if you do have questions, please write them down. Don't forget, as soon as our presentations are over, we're going to be going to Q&A. You'll be able to either wave your hand in your screen or raise the little electronic hand and we will call on you. Okay, now let's go to our next speaker. We are fortunate to have with us tonight Dr. Andrew Winnick. He is the Professor Emeritus of Macroeconomic and Monetary Theory at Cal State University in Los Angeles, California.
What I want to do is not repeat what other people have said, but I want to add something to it. I think we're all agreed that there is a crying need for infrastructure. I think that's not an issue. I do want to just amplify one element of that, and that is to understand that of all the major industrial countries on planet Earth, we are falling behind. You have high-speed railroad from Lisbon, Portugal to Czechoslovakia, from Naples to Scotland, all over China, all over Japan, and we can't build a railroad from San Francisco to Los Angeles. There's something going on. There's something wrong, and that to say nothing of when we have 45,000 unhoused people in Los Angeles. Our society has failed. That's a level of homelessness that is not seen in virtually any other major industrialized country on planet Earth. So we have a serious deficiency. This is not just small amounts of problems. These are major, major problems. That's one side. I don't think I have to say more about that. The key point I want to make is we don't have any alternative but to do this through the bank, because the only other way you're going to get it is if you're talking about trying to do raising taxes, which is not going to work, increasing government spending, which is not going to work, and increasing government debt, which is not going to work. Trying to fund all this through the federal government by the usual mechanisms of taxing and government expenditures is simply politically impossible. There is no possibility that you're going to get bills of this order of magnitude to meet these needs. It's not going to happen, which means either we do it through the bank or it doesn't happen. It's not a nice thing to have. It's not an additional thing that would be nice to have. It is an absolute essential. It is the only way, because when you do this through a bank, and I won't get into too much of the details, but basically you allow the bank to be an agent for the government bonds. We have trillions of dollars of government bonds outstanding. The bonds can be then exchanged for preferred stock. And it's important that it's preferred stock, because it's not stock that can control the bank. Preferred stock doesn't vote, just gets a dividend. And the dividend would be 2% in addition to their other expenditures. And then for every dollar, you generate $10 in loans, which is the way every bank in the country works. The other thing I want to make is that one needs to understand that we are, as a country, and to some extent even broader into the EU, really in economic trouble. Our banks are being downgraded. I'm talking about the biggest banks, not the little banks in San Francisco and what have you. The biggest banks in the United States, Chase Manhattan, all the rest of them, are being downgraded because they are so burdened because of, I won't get into details, in terms of the value of their bonds, in terms of some of the lending they did at 2 and 3% when it's now 5 and 6% as the cost of their funds. Our banking system's in trouble. The economy is slowing down, not speeding up. We need to generate more jobs, and we're not doing that, and in anything like adequate numbers. So we have a major problem of getting the economy going, and this can do it. $5 trillion and 25 million jobs makes a major, major difference. Last thing, one of the previous speakers talked about everything that the WPA did and during the last time we had a bank like this. It wasn't just the WPA. We kept the same bank. How the hell do you think we fought World War II? Where did we get the money to build the aircraft carriers, to build the tanks, to build the bombers? The entire military infrastructure of the United States depended upon this sort of funding. And when the war was over, we had millions and millions of killers coming home. That's not very nice to say, but it's true. We had millions and millions of young men who have been trained to kill, who left their homes to go fight a war. And if they came home and they wanted to get married, they wanted to have families, they wanted jobs, and we had nothing for them, we would have had a revolution. And that's happened to other countries. And so where do you think we got the money to build millions of homes for these people, all the housing after World War II? Where did we get the money for the GI Bill? We got much of this from this sort of banking activity with the Refinance Corporation. And it was also part of how Eisenhower started the plan for the Interstate Commerce Commission, until the big banks put this bank out of business. I mean, we've done this before. We know how to do it. Lincoln did it with the Civil War, funded it through this sort of thing. So the point I'm trying to make is, this is not nice to have. This is essential. We either do this or this doesn't happen, and we are in deep, deep trouble. And I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Professor Winnick. Really appreciate those insights. And of course, I totally agree with you. Okay, next we're going to go to the great state of Ohio. We have with us tonight Craig Schwartz. Craig was recently a candidate for Congress and spent months tromping around rural Ohio, and he is now the chair of the Rural Caucus for the Democratic Party of Ohio. Craig, you have.
Thanks a lot. I thought I had to wait one more time, but I'm ready to go. I'm glad that the doctor just mentioned that about the banks, because just recently I watched The Big Short again. And if you haven't seen that, I hardly encourage you to watch that again, because if you needed any more reason to think about Wall Street and how they act and how they think, that's the movie. They don't have our interests at heart. Their model is greed, first and foremost. And I myself was actually a victim of the crash. When that happened, I lost my business. I almost lost my house. And when we talk about homelessness, millions of people were thrown out as a result of that crash. And we never fully recovered. Even during those years, the Obama years, when he was trying to get things going, and he didn't put enough gas on the gas pedal and took his foot off the gas, a lot of people were still left needing jobs, needing housing, and they were left behind and forgotten about. Now, Joe Biden remembers that lesson. He's putting together some good bills and stuff like that, but it's not going to be enough, like the doctor said. We cannot operate this through the budget. Now, I've lived overseas in several different countries like Germany and the UK, France, and I lived in the Middle East and watched those Gulf nations rise up through the sand by using their public financing models. They have public banks, they have investment authorities, and they were pouring everything into their infrastructure. The sole exception would probably be the UK, when I lived there during the Thatcher years and saw exactly what we were doing right now, pulling back, austerity. And we can't be doing that. When I was living in London, in fact, they had a train crash, a famous one, that the train didn't stop. It went right through Charing Cross Station. And when they pulled all the rolling stock out, it was from the 20s. This is what we have to be facing. This is a generational thing. I like what the alderman said, generational wealth. That's what we need to be building on. Now, most of these people on this call, as you know, we're all, we're in our later years. And one of the lasting things that we could be doing is making sure that we pass on generational wealth, making sure that we leave our environment better than the way we found it. I was a young man in a hurry. Now, I was traveling around, learning things, wanting to change the world and stuff like that. Now I'm an older man, and I find myself in the same kind of hurry. We need to be making these decisions. We need to be getting the unions on board. If we start expanding and building the things that we want to do, we will be creating a whole new generation of wealth, just like the unions in the 50s. That was the backbone. I just read, interestingly enough, how BlackRock and Vanguard, two of the largest mutual fund companies in the world, that hold almost all of the wealth in the world. And the last couple of years, they were, listening to shareholders and thinking green and investing green and stuff like that. Guess what they're doing? Boom. Here comes that greed model again. They're pulling back. There's no more shareholder ventures going on here, going towards the greener future. The greedy is good model is returning with a vengeance. The banks are in trouble. Again, I know, we all, this is, sounding the same thing and everything else, but all the warning signs are going off again. And again, back to Big Short, that was the warning at the end of the movie. Nobody got put in jail. The lessons weren't learned. We're repeating the same mistakes, and we're headed for a crash. We need this kind of institution, emulate the other countries. They talk about Europe all the time and the inflation's bad over there, stuff like that. But they still have the bedrock of financing, public infrastructure. They don't let that go. They keep improving on that. And to the doctor's point, we can't even build a single rail line. What happened to us? I like what Representative Boyce said about the WPA projects. Toledo Zoo is another WPA project. It's a fantastic zoo. Still exists to this day. It's still a great institution. We just got to get back to that kind of, workmanship, craftsmanship, thinking about, hey, this is an America First kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Bringing back our supply chains, creating the kind of system and works that we need to pass on to the next generation, and making sure that, we're doing our thing, doing what is right by us. So thank you very much. I mean, this is the message that I take to Ohio, and I preach to the rural caucus, the rural counties. and it's very well received, particularly amongst Republican township trustees and county commissioners that have been living off the teat of the Biden economics for the last several years. They like this stuff. We got to keep it going. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Craig. Craig, really appreciate you being here. Okay, now I am going to zip through a couple of slides before we get to Q&A. So first of all, I want to let everyone know that we recently had a letter to the editor in the Honolulu Star Advertiser supporting the National Infrastructure Bank, and you can Google it and actually take a look at that letter if you want to. If you want to try to get a letter into your hometown newspaper, we would be happy to help you with editing a letter or providing you like a template that you might be able to use. And of course, the more letters to the editor that we get out there, the more we can educate the public on the benefits of a national infrastructure bank. Okay, next, a little look at the bill. So let's put it up there, HR 4052. This is the new number for the bill for this Congress. And you see there the phone number if you want to call Congress and ask to speak to your representative. Ask for a meeting, and we would be happy to get on a Zoom call with you and your member of Congress and talk to them about a national infrastructure bank. So the more calls they get for their constituents, the better. And so we're really looking for your support in helping us out in getting to those members of Congress and getting more sponsors for our legislation. And then, of course, you see the email for the coalition. Okay, next. We have a helpful flyer here that is on our website at nibcoalition.com. This is a flyer that is in a format where it's easy to download and print. So you can print it to your local printer, and then you would have that information. And if you were to happen to run into your local legislator or the mayor of your town or your member of Congress this weekend, have one of these in your back pocket or in your purse. It would be great to pass on this information to your member of Congress, or print it down and mail it to them and ask them for a meeting. So this flyer, again, is located on our website at nibcoalition.com. Okay, so I do want to again thank everybody for the donations that we received that enabled us to send that team to NCSL. We thought that was very helpful. And of course, if you would like to help us help fund our work, you can go to our website, nibcoalition.com, and make a donation there. And then, of course, you can see that we have an action page, a website, a newsletter. We've got a YouTube channel, Twitter, email, the whole works.